All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Lowdown. Today, I'm super excited because I got someone who's killing it in the real estate space. He's utilizing an investment strategy that I'm not super familiar with, so I'm really excited to learn about it. I think he has a lot of value to add to you guys. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you guys to Raman Sidhu. Raman, what's up, dude?
What's up, man? Appreciate you having me on here. Excited to kind of just share my journey, kind of my insight on real estate and doing something a little bit different, I guess, in the real estate space. So that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, if people don't know who you are, could you just go into a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've actually done a lot of real estate before. I used to wholesale and I flipped a couple houses, but what I do full time now is residential assisted living for the elderly. Mm-hmm. To simplify it, we have a residential home. We have 6 residents, so they're all older. They need some kind of care. They stay in our home. They pay kind of rates per room, and we provide them full care. So it's like renting out to somebody, but also having a little bit of that medical side. Not to say we aren't medical facilities, like we don't provide medical care, but we help them with their activities of daily living. So everything from brushing their teeth to feeding them, to make sure they get their medication, to make sure they have some activity and just really have, kind of the best time of their life at the age that they're at and in the condition that they're in.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go deep into the residential assisted living, but before we get into that, maybe we can go back a little bit further. I know you said you've been doing some wholesaling, some flipping. What did you do before that? Did you always have investing in real estate in your mind, or did you come from a second career?
Yeah, and then, I've done a lot of different things, but I've never really had too much of a career. The only career I ever had is right out of college. I worked for Enterprise, which I honestly think was probably the best experience I got because I learned my basics of sales from there. So I learned a lot about selling. I was pretty good at it. I don't know if everybody's probably rented a car at some point, but we made a lot of our money selling the insurance and upgrading people. Got like top salesman a bunch of times there. But after that, some of my buddies had a video production company, and I just started working with them on the side, and then eventually left Enterprise and went with them to do the business side of it. So these guys were awesome at creating commercials. So not, what's so popular now with the small shorts, but they were creating like big commercials that would go on TV or, on people's websites, or some companies would display in their lobby. So they were creating the videos. I started running the business side of it. All was going well. COVID happened, and they pivoted to more passion projects. So, because nobody was really doing business at that time. So jumped into passion projects, and I kind of was like, okay, I'm not into like wanting to create Netflix films and shorts and videos like that. Like I was just here for the business. So then I got into real estate at that point, and that's when my journey started with wanting to invest in real estate, but not having the money to do it. So I got into wholesaling. And I don't know if you remember that time pre-COVID when wholesaling was like popping off and it was really popular on TikTok and Instagram. So I just tried to do it myself. Didn't really work out. Ended up working for a great guy, Gary, and just did wholesaling full time. Really got deep into that game for a couple of years. Started doing it myself, then flipped some houses, and then landed up on residential assisted living facilities. And that's kind of been the only goal now and the only thing that I really committed to.
Awesome. I know a lot of people don't really know what wholesaling is.
Yeah.
Whenever I tell people about wholesaling, they're like, you mean Costco? Like, what's wholesaling? So maybe you can go into a little bit about what wholesaling is.
Yeah. And I'll give you a breakdown of kind of our operation. So the biggest I done it was when I was working for this guy, Gary, right? We're a small team. It was him. We had 3 of us in the office, and then we had a bunch of VA, virtual assistants. So what we would do is we would buy a list. We were doing it at a bigger scale, so we wouldn't really buy a list of people's addresses with like detail. Like a lot of people buy lists based on this person's renter. They have rental properties. They have this condition, this going on. We would just buy zip codes, and we'd buy these huge lists, 10,000 a month. So 10,000 like list of people who own homes a month. We would skip trace them. We would get all their information. And then we had virtual assistants in South America, actually, some in the Philippines, mainly in South America because of the accent. And so they would call people like, everybody probably got those calls at one point like, hey, do you want to sell your house? So our team would do that. And when somebody said yes, they would put it in our CRM, and then that's where I would jump in. So if somebody just said yes, they want to sell, they asked a couple questions about their home, then it came on to me, and I did the initial calls, the follow-ups, and we would buy these properties sight unseen, all through the phone. And we were doing California, but I was actually doing mainly in Florida, Texas, North Carolina. So sight unseen, never really in the area, all through the phone. We would just get these properties under contract, and then we would sell this contract. So this investment agreement, we would sell it to another investor and make a lump sum of cash on top of that. And then we would just walk away.
Got it. How many deals did you do?
So at like our peak operation, I was doing 3 to 6 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So it sounds crazy, but our operation was huge. I was doing about 80 calls a day. we had a lot of metrics, 80 calls a day, 4 hours talk time, and at least 5 offers. So I was making 5 cash offers a day, 5 days a week.
Okay.
And it would translate to 3 to 6, a month. And, I got really good at that. And I would probably say it was some of the time where I made the most money, but it was the grimiest business I've ever done. And I knew I couldn't do it forever. So I tried to flip some of these houses that I found wholesaling myself. And then I was like, flipping houses is really stressful. And I made more money sitting on the phone, just calling people.
Totally.
So I was like, wholesaling is the way to go, but I can't do that forever. And, we'll probably jump into the story later. But in that whole meantime, I was learning about assisted living facilities, but they just seemed too hard to open up. So I kind of just put that on the back burner. And then, through some meetup events and things like that, got into assisted living. And then now this is the dream and the goal.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to learn a little bit of wholesaling also, because my first deal that I did was flipping. And I think a lot of the real estate investors, they say that it's like a progression thing, right? So it's like usually you kind of like start with wholesaling because it's like the lowest barrier to entry, least amount of risk. And then from there you kind of graduate to flipping. And then from there you eventually get into like rentals and stuff like that. And so I think I started backwards. I started with flipping, and now I'm trying to get into a little bit of wholesaling because my first flip, super risky, very stressful.
100%.
And so now I'm really trying to learn a little bit of the wholesaling stuff. But I know all that stuff's super interesting, but I really want to get into the residential assisted living stuff. So you said you were trying to learn about that. Didn't really know too much about that. So like, how did you even, I guess, learn about residential assisted living?
Yeah, so my journey for residential assisted living started off with, I was wholesaling and I was buying properties. So I have a couple fourplexes, one fourplex and a couple other properties that I got through wholesaling that were just super good deals. Mm-hmm. And I was making good money. My wife was a nurse, and she was a bedside nurse, Valley Medical here in San Jose. She did that for about 6 years, and she was like burning out. And then she had like this coworker who just quit, and her coworker had 2 residential assisted living facilities. My wife didn't know her that well, but heard about her and was just telling me like all the coworkers are going crazy, saying she's leaving, going to go open more care homes, and it's such a good business. My wife started teaching me about it, but she didn't really know how it all works out. So I actually did a ton of research, read kind of every book out there, every free video to watch, learned everything I could for like months. And me and my wife would just keep discussing it. And we actually even went to go see a couple homes, so just toured a couple homes. And then we were like, this is what we're going to do. The main thing was my wife was burning out, and then she just started her master's program to be a nurse practitioner. So that was supposed to be the escape. But then when we started learning about assisted living facilities, it was just so hard to figure out how to open. I actually, through my wife's Facebook account, reached out to that nurse she used to work with, never heard back. Reached out to a couple people, never heard back from them. So we were just like, we bought this property in Stockton. It's a fourplex. I got a killer deal on it. I'm cash flowing like $1,200 with existing tenants. Didn't do anything to it. So I was like, and I did the math. I was like, I can make like $2,000, $2,500 a month once I get things settled. And so I was like, okay, we'll just work hard. We're going to buy a bunch of properties. This has been a great, fourplex. We keep repeating this. One day the real estate dream, right? We'll retire and we'll be good to go. So then we just started focusing on that because we're like, these care home stuff is hard. My wife's like, it's going to be another business. She's like, I'm going to be a nurse practitioner, and, things are going to go so well now, and I'm going to love my job, which, fast track. She became a nurse practitioner, and it was better than bedside nursing, but still very stressful. She had a different kind of stress. She wasn't physically tired now, but mentally it was a lot. And then she's like, I can't do this forever. So then I was like, okay, well, maybe we got to do this assisted living thing. And then I met Eileen, who kind of mentored me at a meetup, and then the journey began.
Got it. I love that. I feel like I'm really in the same boat. So my wife's actually a nurse practitioner in school right now.
Okay.
And so she works at Stanford. She works on the adult side, but she works on a neurosurgical floor. And so she definitely feels like it's very challenging. I mean, all floor nursing in general is like super, super hard. And like a lot of people feel the burnout for sure. I've been a nurse now for almost 10 years. And so I don't feel like, honestly, I'm growing too much more in the hospital, to be honest. I don't feel as much burnout as people in the floor nursing. But yeah, it's something that I'm definitely very interested in as well. And so would you say that having your nursing license is definitely very helpful for getting the care facility stuff?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think there's 2 parts to it. And just even seeing my wife's side, there's this medical side, right? Running the care home, taking care of it. Like I said earlier, we're not a medical facility, but at the end of the day, you're caring for people. And there's tons of medication, there's tons of symptoms. And those are stuff, even with me being in it for a bit now, I still don't understand. But just having my wife as a resource when someone's not feeling well, things of that sort, it's great. More than that, families love it. So, it's something that if you get into the industry and you just have that background, you're going to shine. You're going to be probably better than 90% of the homes out there, more demand, probably better care because you actually understand what's going on. And to be honest, I don't even know how I would be able to do this business if I didn't just have her as a resource. And then the other side of it, it is a business. There's a lot of things to it, kind of like when you buy a real estate property, right? There's a lot of getting it ready, getting licensing, a lot of sales, because you're like selling what you do here to get families to want to commit and come to your home. And so I think on being a nurse, it's huge for the day-to-day operations. I think for us, it worked out really well because I always liked that real estate and the sales side, and she always liked the healthcare side. So it was like a good mesh.
Okay. So if situations like say I'm a nurse or I have a bunch of friends for nurses, well, obviously we're really focused on the care side of things. We really want to get a care facility, but we don't know the business background. What would you say to those kind of nurses who want to get into it? Do you think they should just find someone who's operating and then maybe partner like that? Or like, what would you say for this?
Yeah, I think that if you're a nurse, and probably this, if I do kind of my part here, you should be sold and probably talking to your wife after this, like we're opening a care home. But if you're a nurse and you have any interest in real estate and you're okay with like, I got to run a business. I think as long as you can say I can run a business and I can commit to learning that, like this is probably the best opportunity for nurses. One, I think you have enough kind of income coming or building where you can get yourself started. It's not a cheap business to get into, but it's something that if you're used to working on the floor for 10 years and the stress of that and how hard that could be, it will seem like a breeze caring for 6 people, right? It'll never be too hard of a day, even if you had, the worst of days and your care team didn't show up and you have to come work. Like I remember the first time my wife had to assist with changing ileostomy, like changing the bag. And I was like, oh, isn't that going to be kind of gross? She's like, no, this is like, I did this so often. It's like nothing to me. She's like immune to it, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, this is easy. So whenever she even had to step in and care for the residents, it was a breeze. So I think if you're a nurse, you're going to do the most important thing. You're going to care for the residents, right? And then the rest of it could be figured out. Like that's the easier part, right? If you're going to put the care first, you're going to do great. People are going to want to be around you because you're going to do a great job. The rest of it is just figuring out all the systems to put in place and just making it happen, right? So I think that assisted living facilities is like the best way for any nurse who doesn't want to be in a career to do something where they'll probably, meet those financial goals they want and be able to kind of have their own business and their own investment.
Maybe we can talk about a little bit the numbers. Like what's some numbers that you can expect to see from a care home?
Yeah, so I have one care home. Well, we have 3 now, but the ones that are fully operating, I have one in Brentwood, California, and I have one in Sunnyvale, California. So in Brentwood, our average rate is $8,000 a month per resident.
Wow.
And in Sunnyvale, very similar. Brentwood just ended up being a great area, but Sunnyvale's $9,000 a month per resident. And I even have a resident in Brentwood that pays $12,000 a month, and I have a resident in Sunnyvale that pays $10,000 a month, so it could be higher. The lowest resident I have is at $6,500, and she's very independent, but also was my first resident. So, the first one's always the hardest, so you just go for it. So when you do all that put together, typically your expenses are about half, maybe a little bit more. In my Brentwood home, I am overly staffed. And what I mean by that is like I have 2 nighttime caregivers, which most care homes don't even have one. And I have 2 in the day, and I have one that works 3-hour shifts. We're going to probably reorganize some of that schedule because it's pretty heavy staff right now. But with all that, my monthly expenses are $30,000. And we bring in with our $12,000 resident and our average of 8, and some that are slightly higher, we do 51.
Wow.
So the profits in residential assisted living facilities are definitely there. I know that's going to excite everybody. I don't think it's like an easy business to get going and understand, but yeah, it's definitely very profitable. This has been, in my Brentwood home, I've literally hit from when we purchased home in October till now, which is October, it's been a year. And I was always skeptical through the process because everybody told me the numbers, but now I can confidently say when people say, hey, you can make $10,000 to $20,000 a month with one assisted living facility, it is true. It's very doable. That is probably the difference is we're hands-on. So we don't have the administrator, which is like the management person. That's us ourselves. So we save a lot there. But with full-time care staff, and I think us caring for the residents really well and not cutting expenses, we do that $10,000 to $20,000 a month.
Killing it, bro.
It's really panned out. And I appreciate like kind of you mentioned that, saying that, but like I've done so many things with like the wholesaling and then the flipping, and you've had experience with that. And there's a lot of ups and downs. And the dream of opening a care home was, let's find something that we can do that could be consistent, that we're not looking for the next deal, and we can grow from. And I think we finally reached that. And it's just kind of cool sitting down and talking about this 1 year from when we purchased the home. And it really panned out to be what it was. Because a lot of times these investments sound really good on camera
Totally.
or on the internet. And then it's just nice to know assisted living is what it was meant to be.
Yeah. Are there different levels? I know obviously there's the big like sniffs and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which are like medical grade. Are there different like levels to your assisted living?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, what we do is residential too, right? So residential is probably the easier one to open, and it's the easier one to manage. So in California, and every state's a little bit different, we have 6 residents, and that considers us residential. Once you go past 6, you get into this like commercial side, right? Get into 7 to 8, there's a lot of like little things you do with licensing and get there, but like then there's these big facilities that take care of 100, 200 people. And beyond that is the SNFs. So SNFs, nursing facilities, are people that need full-time like care. So they're doing what we do with the care side of it. What we provide is assist them with their daily living and their daily activities, and we manage their medical side. So we help them with their appointments. We make sure the nurses come and see them at the home. Some of our residents might be on hospice, so they're a little bit more care, but it's an outside nurse coming in. So we don't provide that medical care. We're not allowed to either in the facility. I mean, as a nurse, you are able to, like my wife is able to, but we try to separate that because I don't want her to have another job. That's why we did this. So you could provide more care, but essentially we're not providing medical care. That's all happening on the outside. We're just organizing everything and making sure they're in a place where they're not, risk of falls, risk of getting, more injuries or sicknesses. We're really just trying to, look after them.
Or what's the demographics of like, I guess like the residents that come through? Is it like typically older patients? Is it also younger patients? Like, I'm just curious, like what's...
Yeah, I mean, typically I would say they're going to be older, but right now one of my residents is 68. So, you typically hear that they're going to be elderly, but if I look at mine, like you do get a mix. I would say the biggest thing is, to be honest and to understand, is everybody who's there has some kind of higher care need. They really shouldn't be or can't be living independently. And I think that's what makes it very different. Everybody's there for some type of care.
Okay, awesome. Do you think maybe we can go through the A through Z of like, how do you even find a care, like what's the ideal kind of property?
Yeah.
What's the, I guess the expenses that you expect to do to like start it up, all that different stuff.
Yeah. And I'm going to wing it. So like when people are watching this and they're like, doing the math, it doesn't make sense. This is really on top of my head, zero rehearsal, didn't know what questions are coming. To break it down, there's a couple ways to get into it, right? You can purchase a property, so you can purchase an existing care home. And I will be honest, one thing about this industry that I still never understood is they're not that expensive to purchase for the returns. A typical care home, you buy a property, right? If it's an existing care home, you're going to pay for the property that's there, and then you're paying like $100,000 to $200,000 for the business. But what comes with buying an existing care home, just to touch on the bad, is typically the numbers aren't really well. This is like an older business that, you'll see faces like myself and some new people getting into, but it's been something that most people are in it, own a couple, 3 to 5 of them, and they've been in the industry forever, and, their financials aren't the best. So when you're buying an existing care home, you get horrible financials, and you also get a lot of lower rates. So typically, let's just say right now in Sunnyvale, I could say my average is $9,000 a month. In an older care home, they might be charging $5,000 or $6,000. So it's per resident, okay, which sounds like a lot of money, and it's great, but there's still high expenses. And when you look at that, like when you're trying to purchase a business like that, as much as it might seem easy, like I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna change the residents, I'm gonna get higher rates. It's very hard to tell somebody who's been cared for 4 or 5 years, hey, I'm a new owner and now I gotta charge you $3,000 more, right? So you get stuck with a lot of older homes, a lot of low-paying residents. But it isn't that expensive of a cost to get in. I mean, relatively for your return. So about $200,000 to $300,000 for the business, and you pay for the real estate. You could buy an existing care home. The other thing you could do is start your own. And the 2 ways to do that is you need a property first. That's the hard part. Yeah. So you can either purchase a property or you could lease a property. When you're purchasing a property, you're typically putting 20% down. So that itself, where we're at, could be from $200,000 to like literally $400,000 or $500,000, right? At 20%. So you need a big chunk to buy a property. The other thing to do is, if you're not ready to buy, is you could lease. The challenges with leasing is just like the challenges maybe with wholesaling, convincing somebody to buy their house off market, is you have to convince somebody to rent you their house where you're gonna have 6 residents and you're gonna make some modifications. But 100% doable, because one of our properties, so our property in Sunnyvale is leased. And, the reason it's leased is to buy a home in Sunnyvale. It's the house we have right now, not much more bigger, especially than my Brentwood house, but like a $2.5 million home.
Yeah.
So we'd have to put like $400,000 or $500,000 down and still have like a $10,000 to $14,000 monthly payment, which even with those numbers, it's great because you have a real estate property, but you're not really cash flowing that heavy. It really affects it. So, leasing is a great option if you're able to convince somebody to lease to you. So now you got the property, but I know one of the questions is, well, what kind of property? So the most ideal situation is 6 bedrooms. People want private rooms. You do get shared, but shared is always harder. It's not as attractive. A lot of families don't want to put their loved one in a shared room, but sometimes you have to sacrifice. So I would say a 4 to 5 bedroom home is something you can get away with. Anything under that, it's really not going to be, optimal. I wouldn't even go for it. So you're aiming for that 4 to 5. If you get 5, I think that's the sweet spot. If you could get to 6, you're going to be doing really well.
Okay.
So 6 bedrooms, and then you want a bigger home, 2,000 to 3,000 square feet, and then single story for sure. Double story is doable. It's not saying you can't get licensed, but an elderly person is not going to want to go up the stairs, and you're going to have to do all these fire requirements. You're going to need like a lift, maybe sometimes even like an elevator. Like they have these pad ones that you just roll up on and it takes you up, but it's kind of complicated. So I always say single story. Even if you have an existing home and it's double story, I would still say go for the single. But maybe if you have a smaller home, you could figure out how to make the 4 bedrooms work. Then beside that, location has a key part. So looking at where we're at, right? I said Brentwood's a really great area and Sunnyvale's a great area. If we go from Brentwood, there's Antioch, really close by, like 15-minute drive. But Antioch doesn't have a good reputation, right? Antioch's average rate is like $6,000 a month. Brentwood's average rate is $8,000 a month. So just being 15 minutes away in the right area makes a huge difference. And then beyond that, when you're looking at the right city, you want like the right demographic area. So the little hack I like to share with everybody is there's these big box facilities. So there's the Atrias, Sunrises. They're the ones, the Merrill Garden, they're the ones that are like these really big brands that charge, I charge 8 to 9 average. They're charging like $12,000 to $16,000 a month. Wow. So they charge really high. There's a lot of demand. But when they open a facility, they do a lot of market research. They probably spend thousands, millions to figure out where to open. So if you're in an area that has a big box facility, like 5 to 10 minutes away, it's probably a good neighborhood. So that's like your easy, quick hack of like, this might work. And then I try to be near a hospital just because, the ambulance is always going to be there and take them to places, but families like that reassurance that there's a hospital nearby. So I look for a hospital 5 to 10 minutes away. And then I just look for an aging population. If you're going to a trendy area and you're like right next to Santana Row and we think that's cool, like, the elderly don't need to go to Santana Row, right? But you want to be in an area where like Willow Glen, where you just know there's elderly people living in your neighborhood. And that's going to be, a good look, like a good idea if this is a good location. Awesome. And beyond that, little details, good sized doors, no level changes in the house, things of that sort. And then you're going to just have to do some modifications to make it ADA-ish compliant.
Well, you just said so many bombs for people to take in.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you need. You got your house.
I love that you said that you obviously try and be strategic about locations, being close to hospitals, trying to find locations where these big companies do a lot of research. It's kind of like Airbnbs where you heard people say, try and pick areas where there's like a Chick-fil-A or Whole Foods.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a cool side to see from the residential assisted living. More questions to ask. Where do the people who like the caregivers, do they just come in for shifts or do they stay in the property?
Yeah, so there's both ways, and we have both setups at the different houses, but my preference is live-in caregivers. And you'll hear a lot of goods and bads, like as you research and figure out what you want to do. First thing is if you're treating people really well and not like employees, like family, they're going to treat you well. But I like live-in caregivers because they're always reliable. They're staying with live-in. They're staying in the house typically for at least the days that they work. Let's just say they work a shift from Tuesday to Friday or till Saturday. Like they're going to be living in the house. So at night, they just have a place to sleep. One, it gives them a spot to sleep. I don't charge them rent typically. But with them being in the house, you always count on them. Typically, a caregiver who's like the core and heart of your business, their rates is like minimum wage plus a couple of dollars. And we all know whatever industry you're in, if somebody's getting paid that amount, you typically get call-offs. And in this business, if you don't have somebody show up to work, like you're in pretty big trouble, right? You have to have somebody there. You can't get away with it. So just having these live-in caregivers, and knock on wood, like we've had really reliable shifts. We haven't had to work many shifts. There's been little odd days, but typically we always have somebody there to cover the care for our residents.
What kind of training or like I guess like licensing or whatever do the caregivers need? Because I guess how do you ensure that like quality care gets given? Because it's just a stupid example, but I think of like this one movie. I don't know if it's like Old School or something else, where like Vince Vaughn is like having his grandmother stay, and then Ben Stiller's like the caregiver, and he's like an absolute like asshole behind doors. But yeah, how do you ensure that happens?
Yeah, so you're really looking for the right caregiver. In California, there's no like big certificate or training. You know, there's like the CPR training and first aid, but it's really just a couple of videos anybody watches and they get a certificate. You're really looking for caregivers that have experience. Every caregiver I have has some kind of experience. If somebody doesn't have much experience, typically when we bring them on board is we bring them on a couple of shifts to work as extra hands and try them out for a week. We don't employ them fully and commit them to the team unless we know. But most of the people we have, they've had years of experience and they've been references, and not like the show me all your work references and give me a resume, but like referrals. Our caregiver recommended them, or they're like a cousin, a family friend. Usually all of our care team is like, this is really interrelated, where they know each other. They recommended a friend. They like somebody's come and we've loved them as a caregiver. And then they say, hey, my friend's also looking to be a caregiver here. Are you guys hiring? And then we bring them on board. So just that like true reference of good experience and somebody vouching for them is the best thing we found.
Yeah. What are some of the regulatory hurdles that people face, or like, I guess like all the early startup things, that licensing and all that stuff that it takes from like when you acquire property to starting actually opening?
Yeah, so there's like three big parts, two main ones related to it, but one's you need an administrator, and this is a person who takes an 80-hour class and then like a 200-question test, and they could be the administrator, which I like to call in simple terms the manager, the person that overlooks the home. So you need that. It could be yourself. It could be somebody you hire. I typically recommend if you're going to open a care home, even if you're trying to be a bit hands-off, you still get it, and you can always pop in and be the administrator if needed, but you also know what the administrator should be doing. So there's the administrator, and then the harder pieces are there's licensing, and with licensing, there's fire safety. So fire safety is doing all the things to your home, and every single city is a little bit different because you get licensed or you get that fire safety approval from your local fire department. So my house in Brentwood was through Contra Costa Fire, and my house in Sunnyvale was from the Sunnyvale Fire Department, and both had very different restrictions and wants and needs. So you go through them and you do all the fire clearance. So initially they're going to come and walk your home and say, this is everything you need to be done, needs to be done. You can get all that done, then they're going to sign it all off. Besides the fire, there's licensing. And licensing is this huge application. There's part A and part B. Part A is all the paperwork they give you. And it's like some really funny, fundamental stuff. Like they look into your finances, your background. They ask you like what your monthly expenses are. They basically want to see, can you run this, and do you have enough funds to keep this open in case maybe you struggle the first couple months with 1 or 2 residents instead of your 6. So they really go through all that. And then after that is like part B is all your policies and procedures. So it's like 150, like 200 pages of like policies and procedures. And the hardest part and the struggle you have is none of this is out there. They'll say we need all these policies. And it could be neighborhood complaint policy to, how you care for your residents, how theft policy is for the home. But there's like no reference or resource of where that comes from. They kind of just want you to make it up, but it to be relatable. And from what I learned being in the industry, you either have to have somebody who's in the industry help you. You could pay somebody and like kind of buy it. But there's no way to just do it yourself. Same thing with the licensing application. Like you go onto their website and all the links are broken. There's nothing to download the application. Like you have to get it from somebody or some resource. It's like this weird, like hard to get into kind of community that even when you call licensing department, here's the Department of Social Services, and they don't tell you anything. Like they won't walk you through the next steps, or if you have a question, they don't have an answer for you.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they're just like super guarded on everything?
I think that the industry, like right now it's super impacted, very like high need that like licensing is so backed up and busy. And then in the industry side, it's very old school. Like when I put these videos out there, everybody messaged me like, nobody's talking about this. Like you're the only one talking about it, because nobody has for years. And it's a very, very close community that like if you go try, like if I want to open a care home and I go reach out to a care home owner, like they are not going to give me questions. Like when I wanted to learn about it and walk homes, I tried to tour homes by saying, hey, I'm looking to get into it. Nobody responded. Nobody wanted to help me. I had to say, I'm looking for a spot for my grandma, my grandpa, and do a tour like as if I was going to be a potential client of theirs. And then I would learn how the home looks, what they're doing, how things are. But it's just this community that's been closed forever, and nobody's sharing about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're definitely the youngest person who I know who's like doing it. And so like the only, I guess, experience or background that I have in is care homes. When I was younger, my grandma, she had one. And so that was, I think, in like Hemet or Moreno Valley. So like super far down south. But yeah, so she had one, but it was like, I can't honestly, thinking back now, I don't know if it was actually assisted living or if it was like one of the bigger ones, but yeah, it wasn't super nice. I just would sit there in the office while she'd be working and be playing on the computer and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's awesome that you're doing everything that you're doing. How long does it typically take for all those procedures and stuff like that to get approved?
Yeah, so it definitely varies. So, the one that we have in Brentwood went really smooth, went really well. And we could probably even been a little bit faster because we did a lot of the work ourselves, like with the fire requirements. The house was cosmetically good, so we didn't have to do too much there. But we bought that house in end of September, like October, and we were licensed in January. So it took about 3.5 months. Our house in Sunnyvale, Sunnyvale hasn't had a care home open for 6 years.
Wow.
So even when I reached out to the fire department to do the licensing stuff, they didn't know, like they were confused. And I had to tell them like, hey, I was going to open a house in San Jose. I contacted San Jose Fire and they gave me these guidelines. Do you want me to share it with you so you guys have a reference? And then which kind of backfired because they used all their stuff against me, but they like made their own. Like while we were going through the process, they were creating their new guidelines because they didn't know what to do because it's been like 6 years since they had one open from scratch. But Sunnyvale also, the local fire works really close with building. So every change they wanted permits. And they treated us like it's ADA compliant. So what I mean is like with the smoke detector we want to install, with the ramps we wanted, they wanted us to get it permitted. But when you get it permitted, you got to create plans, you got to hire a structural engineer, all that stuff. And you got to submit those plans and wait 3 months. So that house took us about like 7 months to get licensed. And it was very out of the blue because the requirements were so different from our Brentwood home. But we couldn't really fight it because I was like, if I fight it with them, because I don't think they should have required all this stuff because we're supposed to be treated as residential. But I was like, that's going to take me another 3 to 4 months. So I just had to do what they said and kind of went with it. So I think it very much can vary city by city. 3 months is very doable. We have another home in Oakley now that just got licensed, let's say about 3 weeks ago, and that took 3 months. Very easy, quick process. It's the same fire department as Brentwood, so it was very easy. We kind of had a heads up. So that one went really smooth. But a city like Sunnyvale, it could take about 7 months to get licensed.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's the hard part, right? How do you hold a home for 7 months and keep paying rent or keep paying your mortgage, especially at this cost that it is today?
Super important to have reserves for situations
exactly.
like that. Is there a max number of care homes that like 1 or 2 people can open?
So as an administrator, so that person who calls themselves the administrator, that person looking over the home, they can have 2 under themselves. But what it looks like I got my admin cert, my wife got it. If you have any partners, they can get it. So you can do 2, 2, 2. But that administrator can only have 2 homes under themselves, but there's no max number of how many somebody can own or operate. Like I know people now who have like 11 care homes. I don't know if I should name drop, but the lady who we reached out for my wife's work now has 12. And COVID time when she left, she had 2. When I researched her, she had 2 and she has 12 all in this like San Jose area.
That's crazy.
Yeah, she's doing amazing.
Killing it. Do you think it's good to just, because I know you said that all those policies and procedures can vary from city to city. Like, do you think it's better just to like say do all your stuff in Brentwood where you know everything? It's easier to do that, or do you think it's good to just like do one here in Sunnyvale, one in Brentwood?
Yeah. So I jumped around, right? I live in San Jose, so the Sunnyvale one's super ideal because it's like 20 minutes, and my Brentwood one's an hour 15. Couldn't get a home out here to purchase, so Brentwood just worked out. I think that being in the same area is the most ideal thing because, one, you'll know how to open. You'll know the same licensing agent, that kind of like the LPA, the person that comes and does your analysis to give you the final license will be similar, but also your fire department will be similar. And then on the other side, when it comes to growing your care home, getting residents, things like that, you build relationships with the community, right? And it's hard to build a relationship with multiple communities. So maybe if you jump like how we have one out there and one over here, it's doable. But you don't want to just open anywhere because then you have to start from scratch. You don't know where your residents are going to come from because nobody knows who you are. You don't have those relationships existing.
Got it. So it takes 3 to 6 months to get all that licensing and stuff like that. Now the fun part, the sales part. How do you find the residents?
Yeah. So there's so many ways to do it. There's like marketing, just you doing the legwork of it. And that's like going out to skilled nursing facilities, hospice agencies, home health agencies, hospitals, because they have case managers, and building relationships, right? So what we're looking for is people who we know are like, maybe they were in the hospital or they were at a skilled nursing facility and they're going to graduate out of that, but they need some kind of care. So if you build that direct relationship with like the case managers and the staffing there, they'll help, they'll say, oh, I know this guy who has this really good care home. You should go check it out. They'll mention that to that potential resident or their family member. And then on the other side is there's a lot of the community. Like one of our residents came from next door. So we did a bunch of like open houses even before we were fully open and licensed. And we invited everybody from people from the industry to the neighbors to come see the home. And it's really that like my mentality has always been show everybody the home, because you don't know if, right now I'm sitting down with Lorenzo and he's like a year from now, he's like, I remember Raman came on my podcast. Like your friend says, oh, my mom needs a place to go, a care home. And you'd be like, oh, I remember somebody who has one. You should check if they still, you should go check them out, right? So it's like treating everybody like a potential marketing resource. And then the number one way to get it is placement agents. So placement agents are liaisons. They're people whose full-time job is to connect with these families. They don't charge the families anything. And they build the relationships with these same people, the case managers, people in the community, things of that sort. They're just doing it all day and all night, and they bring people to you. So once they like you, they like your home, they understand your rates, what you're looking for, what you can provide their client, they'll set up the tours and everything. They'll bring the clients, they'll tour with you. And then if you do get that resident, you pay them a fee, and it could be from 60% all the way to 120% of 1 month's rent.
Wow.
So they get a killer deal out of it too. But, I've gotten a lot of my residents from placement agents, and they've been with us for a while, and it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a big resource. And then those big box facilities. So, these big care homes we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that a lot of residents, they can't take. Like if somebody's too much of a fall risk, they don't have the staffing for it. So they don't take them. And if they know who you are and you have that relationship, they'll recommend them to your home. So that's also another good resource.
Wow. Well, Raman really just told you everything that you guys need to know to open up a care facility.
Yeah, you really could. It's going to be hard, just trying to take all the info and doing it, but you definitely could. It's just taking what I like to tell everybody. It's hard to open, but if you just take it one step at a time, you'll get there.
Yeah. What's been some of the biggest learning lessons you've got so far?
I mean, I think that the hardest part of knowing this thing is knowing you can sustain it every month. It's going to cost you, just like any real estate investment, it's going to cost you more than, what you expected. I think once you get the operation going. So look, when I started this business, I was wholesaling and flipping. And when you're in real estate and in that kind of industry, you're very like money driven, right? How much profit you make. And I got into care homes because I was like, these are very profitable. But just being in it, seeing what we do, it's become very fulfilling. And
awesome.
You learn to care for people, and it's like a very passionate thing now. So I do think to be successful in this industry, you have to always keep that mentality to put others first.
Yeah.
There's going to be times when you're going to charge less of a rate that you want to charge, or, you have to go above and beyond for your resident. We promise all this stuff, but now they want this, and you just got to put like the money aside and care for them. So I think that the biggest thing is just, once you learn that the main part is caring for others, and that's why you're in it, like you're going to kill it and do well.
Yeah.
So I would think that the lessons that I learned are just how different it was than I actually imagined. And, I will say that when I started these, I was hoping, just open these businesses and cash flow all this. It is a bit more hands-on than I would have thought. And I think as time progressed, it's a lot less. When I started, it was like 5 days, 7 days a week. And now it's like 2 to 3 days, but my phone is 7 days a week. I'm consistently on my phone.
Yeah.
So you really just have to learn to balance caring for others, running a business, and you got to get kind of good at sales, because you have to sell yourself to make these families. It's a big cost and a big choice for families, and they really have to want to be at your home.
Yeah. I think it definitely ultimately comes down to, obviously, like you said, just showing that you really cared about people. Building relationships. Relationships is everything in the real estate business.
Yeah.
Because you never know, like you said, someone else could want to start a care facility. Maybe they have another family member who thinks about you eventually, because like Raman's a really nice guy. So
Yeah, and look, the funny thing I like to always push everybody, I am not the ideal face for this, right? When I started this, I thought my wife was I always used to sell my wife, and I still do, as like, she's the nurse practitioner, we own this, but I do majority of the tours, and almost with our care homes, like most of the residents have come through me. And it's just that I really learned to connect and show who I am. And I dress the same way I dress. I didn't shave my beard, which I was like, it's kind of weird. Like sometimes I feel it when like the door opens and the family see me. They're like, oh, and then I have to like show them who I am. But I think that's what's really good. It just, they start seeing the genuine interest.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you're actually doing this from the heart, like people know it. Like you don't even have to put up a front or be different.
Just be authentic.
As long as you're doing it right, you're going to do fine.
That's awesome. What would you say to people who maybe have had a care home for a while, or different kinds, and maybe it's not optimized or they're not doing too well? Like, what would you say? I don't know, different things that they can do to maybe optimize their business.
Yeah, I think that the biggest mistake most people have in the care home industry is they're afraid to charge the right rates. The money sounds crazy, right? Even when I sit here and tell you that our average rate's $8,000 and I have somebody pay me $12,000 a month to be cared for, it sounds insane. But when you charge the right rates, you don't cut corners, right? Like I told you, I'm overstaffed right now in my Brentwood home. And I don't know many care homes in the area that have that much staffing. But right now with my 12,000 resident, he's not easy to care for resident. He's pretty high care. But I had another high care resident move in at the same time. And it's just, I know we could provide the best care by being overstaffed, but I don't have to like worry so much about it. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to like activities and food, like we buy, I do most of the grocery shopping to go to Costco. I honestly buy more clean, natural food for the care home than I do for our own groceries. And it's just like, you don't have to cut corners. Like, residents want to eat out. They want to have steak. We celebrate every birthday and holiday, and I always tell them whatever you guys want during the time. Like, we don't have to worry about it because they're paying us the right rate. So when you're charging the right amount, you're not cutting corners. You're not worried about care. You're not worrying about going above and beyond. If you have to go hire an extra staff member for the whole 2-3 months just to get things stabilized, like you can afford it. When you're charging too low, you're really trying to be hands-on yourself, right? You're trying to step in and work as much as you can. You're trying to cut down on the biggest cost, which is your caregivers. So now, like, when people aren't getting good care, things just go down, right? Yeah. So I really am a big believer in charging the right rate. And I remember during my admin class, my instructor told me, and it was such a funny example, but she said, like, there's a lot of DD's care homes, right? Care homes that are like DD's, right? You walk into DD's, everything's so cheap, but it's like a mess. And I've never actually really been in DD's, but my wife told me about it. Yeah. So it's like, there's Ross, there's Marshalls, there's all that, and then there's DD's, right? It's like it's like kind of like a Goodwill, but new clothes. But then there's DD's, and then there's going to like Nordstrom. Like, it's a very different experience. Or the easiest one is like going to a 2-star hotel or going to a 5-star hotel, and everything's included. When I do my tours and when I talk to the families and my residents, I said, look, we're the 5-star hotel. Our residents have call button. I said, anything you need, you push it. Like, we got it for you. If you want a certain type of food, you let us know. I'm going to get it on the next grocery shop. So it's like, when you're charging the right rates, just like these fancy resorts, like they'll do anything for you. And then, our residents love it. The families love it. And they really understand, like, okay, this is why it's worth paying what I pay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember when I went to your Sunnyvale one, I walked in, it's super bright, that big living room. Yeah. I know you guys obviously did all the remodel and stuff like that, but I think that's probably something that makes you really stand out. And it's even when I always joke with my licensing agents, the fire department, anybody who goes to a bunch of care homes, and I always ask them, like, rank me on like the care homes you've been in, and we've gotten a really great feedback. And it doesn't cost us much more to paint the house nice and buy good looking furniture. And I have bright white furniture, right, which is not ideal for the care homes, but I tell everybody we could just replace it in a year. It's part of our cost of being in business. But it's like different when it feels bright and somebody's in there than when it feels very dark and mismatched furniture and things just don't look good. There's no art on the wall. So we really just try to make it the best environment. And then at the same time, there's the conscious of, if we're charging this rate, like, people should, be in a place that they enjoy, right? Get their value for it. Yeah, it's all holistic. It's like not even just the medical care that they get from the caregivers, but if you feel good in an area, obviously that the mental part of it is so much of the health too.
Yeah, 100%.
So, wow, that's amazing. Do you think now, having done a couple, do you think it's better just to like start one from scratch, or do you think it's easier to just like pick one up from a someone who may be tired of?
So yeah, I think what it's kind of like what your goal is, right? Let's just say for yourself, you're nursing, we had this podcast and you talk to your wife like, oh, we want to do this, right? And you're like, but we want to continue working. If you want to continue working, if you buy an existing care home, you will cash flow from the beginning. The difference I see is like a existing care home will cash flow you maybe like $6,000 a month. If you start one from scratch, like we talked about earlier, it could be from $10,000 to $20,000 a month. It will cost, and cost wise, you're still gonna have these big costs and numbers. I think the biggest difference you see is your outcome. So like for me, my goal was, what can I do to get my wife out of working to make this full time for me? And it was like, okay, grinding it out a little bit, having it a little bit harder, and having a couple bad months to be profitable and sustain ourselves. I like the idea of opening from scratch. And it was very hard to buy an existing care home that was easy to buy because when their numbers were bad, like to be honest, the care home we looked at one to buy before we opened our own, and the numbers were so bad that when we tried to get a loan, they showed 2 months of negative profit, and then they wanted to sell, so they showed break even. But when we went to even get an SBA loan, they're like, this business isn't profitable. Like, we don't want to lend to it, and if we do, the rate's going to be really high. But when you talk to the owner, to tell you the truth, it's very profitable. But it doesn't show that way.
Yeah, always look at the P&Ls.
Yeah, so you struggle with that, right? And most P&Ls of any older business are like that, right? It's just the norm. It's just part of the any business that's existed, right? A lot of people rely on the numbers. So it's very hard to buy one too that makes sense, that shows good, and you get good rates. But I think the biggest difference is if you buy an existing, you do cash flow from day one. It's just going to be a lot less. If you open it yourself, you will cash flow more. I was totally against buying your own, but now that I've done it, like I would be very open right now to buy an existing facility because I feel like, it'd be very easy from day one. Everything would be going. And then just instead of spending the 6 months to get open, I would spend 6 months to fixing that existing care home and making it better.
Okay, awesome. So you have a couple now. And are you trying to scale and trying to be like that, your wife's coworker who has 12? Like what excites you, or what are you looking forward to?
12 sounds wild, like 2 is a lot to manage. 3 is going to be hard. I really think like 4 is like a sweet spot number. And then, I never thought it's only, so, just to share my journey, I know it sounds like I know a lot, but I first care home got licensed in January 2024. I probably started my journey of like really saying this is what I'm doing in January 2023. And we purchased the first home, and we leased and purchased right at the same time as Sunnyvale and Brentwood. So September and October of 2023. So it's only been like a year. But my goal was to get to 4. And then after 4 was probably look at something bigger. I never thought I'd be able to run or manage a bigger facility. But I think my next goal is to consider that 15 to 50 bed facility. And then I think that's really like one of those can sustain everything. I do have some, just so everybody's like watching this and doing all this math and like, oh man, Raman is making 20 here and he gets 3. I do have partners, so it's not all, all me. So I think that helps us scale a lot faster. Profit is a bit less, right? But I think having those 4 or so, and then maybe something bigger is the next goal. But I don't think I could be at 12. I don't think it makes sense. Like I'm not, I want to make good money every single month and have a good life, but I mean, I don't need no stress of running 12 facilities on the day-to-day to survive. What
are the things that you can do? Because obviously there's different stages of like working in the business versus working on the business. Like what are some things that you could maybe do that maybe you're a lot more hands-off? Is there any things that you could do?
I think that it's really focusing on your staff and training, right? So setting up a lot of like policies, procedures in the home, and having those there and having good staff and good caregivers, it could really turn you to be hands-off. And same thing, I think that being hands-off, the difference is your profitability, right? Like we're the administrator now. If we bring an administrator on board, I don't even know the salary, but it's going to be like maybe like $6,000 to $10,000 a month extra, right?
Yeah.
So our profit would cut in half, but then we'd be a lot more hands-off. Yeah. We'd just be one person reporting to us. So it's very doable to create like that more hands-off system, but I don't think anybody could do that at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I do have a couple people I coach, and the first person that I kind of coach, his journey's been about 8 months, and he has his first care home, and his whole goal is to be hands-off. And I even told him, and even up till now, he's getting his first residence super hands-on at the beginning, 5 days a week, getting everything running. He got his caregivers, he's planning to be hands-on for a while, and then probably like once he's 6 residents in, he has a 15 bed facility is kind of big, like 15 resident. But once he's at like his middle ground, he was probably going to hire an administrator, and then he could be a bit more hands off. So I think it's just learning what you want from it, and how much you want this one care home to do for you, and if you're willing to be hands on for it.
Yeah, I think it's just like anything in real estate. You got to really get into the day-to-day stuff in the beginning, just really grind and learn everything about the business before you hire out. Because I think if you just go straight to the scale part and hiring out, it's like you don't really know the things to focus on, or maybe things that people might be sucking at.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with this, what's really hard is like, if you have a bad real estate deal, you lose a little bit of profit, right? But we're caring for people. So if things don't go well, like you can't justify it. You can't cut short on the care you're providing someone. So that's still your ultimate responsibility. I don't like telling anybody that this business is hands-off. Even if you had an administrator and you did all that, like you're still going to be hands-on. It's not a real estate investment. It's a real estate investment and a business. And there's not many business owners that I know that are hands-off.
Yeah.
Like they're involved in some sort of way. And I think that's how this will always be.
Yeah. Love that. Well, Raman's really just dropping bombs for all you guys. So super awesome. We're nearing the end of the podcast. I like to always ask the guests like a couple of different questions. Your favorite podcast or book?
Like the book, and not to judge this, is definitely 48 Laws of Power. It's something that me and my buddy, like as we were starting our first video production business, all that, like we used to go through, highlight, read. I definitely think 48 Laws. And, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, don't much anymore, but just to say where I've gotten all my knowledge, it has to be Bigger Pockets. Without Bigger Pockets, it was the form that one of my friends introduced me to first, but I would have never gotten into real estate. So I definitely have to say, like, that's still, like, for me, the OG of podcasts.
Same. I love Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets is great because it just highlights normal people like me and you who are killing it. It's not obviously someone who owns 50 care homes where you feel like very removed from their situation. It's like people who you can relate to. What were some of the things that you learned from 48 Laws of Power? Like, what's the biggest takeaways from there?
I mean, 48 Laws. Have you read 48 Laws of Power? No. 48 Laws of Power is it's a very judgmental book. A lot of people see it and they're like, it's like about laws to have power over others. But I think the biggest thing about the 48 Laws of Power is just, learning how to read other people and to judge other people. I spent a lot of times in sales before this, and I'm kind of doing the complete opposite now with caring for people. But it's just learning how to be around others, how to read other people with good intentions or bad intentions. I don't think that book's as bad as people make it, where they think like you're reading it because you're trying to be in control. But I think it's just learning how to be around other people and understand kind of what they might be trying to do.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's a good read. A little bit different.
Love it. Who's your biggest mentor, idol, someone you look up to, maybe in the residential assisted living space or someone else?
I think that's hard. I had different mentors kind of as I've gone through the process. When I was wholesaling, it was Gary. When I was starting off the assisted living, it was Eileen and Rich, and they partnered with me too to get things going. So I think through every phase, there's definitely been that. But, at the end of the day, this one's going to sound tacky, but like what's kind of got me through every process is like just the communication I have with my dad. When we grew up, like my dad tried to start a few businesses, try to do all that stuff, and then it didn't work out, and he went back to working, worked a crazy amount of days. He used to work 14 days straight before we would see him, lived in the same house and never seen him because he would work night shift and then just sleep and go to work, never had a day off. But it's like whenever I went through these process, whether it was opening the care home, whether it was looking at buying real estate, like he just was always, even though he didn't maybe make it through his business, like he always had the right knowledge, so I was able to always run everything past him. And even until now, it's like always when I'm thinking of the next care home and how we're going to do things, it's, getting advice from him, but also seeing how he can be part of it and how we could focus on retiring him and him not having to work anymore. My mom was able to retire, so that's really cool. Yeah. And now it's just getting the dad to take it easy.
Love it. Love it. If someone wants to get into real estate, or you're talking to younger you who just started, what's your biggest piece of advice? I talk a lot about assisted living now, right? And I started making content around real estate stuff, and then now it's all just assisted living. Try to post a lot, try to give the knowledge out there. I really think it's finding that space that is going to fit for you and just sticking with it. Growing up, I had all sorts of businesses. I had a rental car business with like old cars for weddings and the video production business, and tried a bunch of other stuff.
but it's just finding that one thing that you like, that you're passionate about, and sticking with it, and then doing other stuff. Like, I know I'm gonna buy more real estate. I flipped a house and wholesale deals while I'm doing this assisted living journey, as we had to kind of get it going. But at the end of the day, it's the best feeling I've had is that I found one thing, got really good at it, stuck with it, started sharing my knowledge about it, which made me learn more about it. Yeah. It really changed, like, when I just focused on that one thing. And I know a lot of people say it, but it has been a big difference, just having that one thing that you're focused on and doing it.
Yeah, I myself find myself guilty of trying too many different things, but I think that's important because obviously you figure out what you like and all that different stuff. But once you find something you like, just like Raman said, just really focus on that, go really deep on it, do it for like 3 to 5 years, and then diversify. I think that's what really separates you from someone else who maybe has that shiny object syndrome, just always chasing the next best thing.
Yeah, 100%.
So when you're not doing real estate or the care facility stuff, what's your favorite thing to do to kill time or hang out? Or
I mean, recently it's just been golf.
We gotta get out there.
Yeah. It's been like kind of like this business isn't easy and it's very stressful. And before it was very hard because we have residents who fall and get sick and pass away on us. I recently had the first resident pass away. And it's just a lot to take in. And it's just a lot of stress on the day-to-day. Like, my phone rings all day, whether it's family members, whether it's a doctor, whether it's sometimes even the resident calling me directly or the caregivers needing something. So it's kind of that escape. And, I create a lot of like TikTok stuff. I post on Instagram, but like it was kind of cool getting into creating videos around golf. Mm-hmm. And, we got like 35 followers, but it makes me feel like I have something to do with the eating. It helps me sleep at night, right? I edit those videos on my free time and just gives an escape. But it's definitely just been golfing has been the big hobby. Besides that, I used to really be into cars. I'm still into cars, and we go camping, things like that all the time. But right now, number one's golf.
Love it. We'll have to get on the course sometime.
Yeah, we definitely have to go out.
Awesome, dude. Well, if people don't know how to get a hold of you or get in touch, what's the best way for them to do so? Yeah,
I mean, all my social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube is Raman and his beard. So Raman and his beard. So you can always reach out there. I have a couple links in my bio you can click on to set up calls, things like that. But even if you just shoot me a message, I try to get back to you. I will say my TikTok's really supported me a lot more than Instagram. So I'm more likely to respond or be on TikTok more than anything. So
okay. I got to get on TikTok. I don't have it yet.
Yeah, TikTok is a game changer. To give you an example is similar videos, and my Instagram's at 1,500 followers, and my TikTok is at 16.7 thousand followers. So yeah, you never. I think TikTok, you could just 1-2 videos can get.
I'm scared I'm gonna get trapped on it because everyone I know is on it, just like doom scrolling. So
you do spend more time on there, but the difference is like I feel like for Instagram it's all your community, like and it slowly builds from that. For TikTok, you just reach a lot of random people, and it's grown so much. Like I have a lot of people I work with that talked out of state, but it's just you can reach the masses. So I definitely think TikTok's the place to be.
Awesome. Well, everyone, I'll put Raman's information down in the show links. But hope you guys found value in today's episode. I know I did. I don't know too much, so now I feel like I know a lot. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. See you guys on the next one. I'm Lorenzo. This is Raman. So see you guys. Peace.